welcome to Salon 78. For those of you who don't know, Salon 78 is an occasional series of panel discussions produced by first Mardi Gras 78ers on issues of importance to the 78er community and the wider LGBTQI community. This one happens to take place on the very anniversary of the first Mardi Gras on the 24th of June 1978. And that coincidence stimulated us to draw linkages between that event in 1978 and the conditions that we are dealing with in the world today. In March of 1978, activists in Sydney received what is now known as the Letter from San Francisco. This is a copy of the letter. For those of you who have never seen it, it resides in the archives in Melbourne. And it includes a wonderful phrase at the very end, a call to action. Imagine the positive impression millions of people marching peacefully and proudly for gay rights will have on world opinion. Very 70s. And Sydney answered this call, arranging a day of international gay solidarity on the 24th of June 1978. The festival at 10 p.m. started out as a celebration, a Mardi Gras, but soon turned into something else. Here are the 78ers heading up to the cross on their way to the clash with police that would become known as the first Mardi Gras. In March of this year, as we watched increasing attacks on LGBTQI communities in the USA and all over the world, First Mardi Gras decided to reach out in solidarity and sent a letter to San Francisco. It ends by summoning up that original call to action after 47 years. Imagine. And San Francisco responded. This is the banner from this year's Pride in San Francisco. Queer joy is resistance. And the message from San Francisco to us was that our federal government is doing everything they can to attack and oppress us as part of a larger authoritarian crackdown across the USA and extending out to affect the world. Rather than let it crush our spirits, we are instead choosing intentional joy. Queer joy is resistance. And it certainly is, and the 78ers understood that in 1978. Here they are on Oxford Street, just near the Stonewall Bar, where the Stonewall Bar is now, with plenty of queer joy in evidence. Today's Salon 78 is a renewed expression of that international gay solidarity we declared in 1978. And to chair it, who better than Ken Davis, who received the original letter from San Francisco in 1978. Over to you, Ken.
I received it along with Alison Britton's girlfriend, Annie Talbay, and then we set up, this coalition. I wanted to say, we should all have a minute thinking about we're on Gadigal land and pay respect to the custodians and the elders, emerging and past and present, and acknowledge the Indigenous lands we're on. Starting, I'm a really pessimistic person, so I really like this topic because the world's getting really fucked. So I'll start with apologies. Andre from Fruits from Brazil's been held up and he's on his way. And we had hoped to have a very charismatic lesbian presentation on the situation in California and the United States from a couple of different people, all of whom can't do it. But we, in particular, were trying to get Gabby Antolovich, who was really important in the movement here in the early 70s, and also important in 1978, who's now running the Queer Centre in San Jose near San Francisco, but I think she's a little bit overwhelmed with work. And we could have had people from a couple of other regions, but we can't have too many people speaking. In the movement, I got involved in GayLib in 1972, and the movement then was very influenced by what had been happening in the United States, in Britain, in Canada, but also a little bit Mexico and France, later Italy. I think in 1973, there was this moment when we uncovered our movement's history from 1850s in Germany and internationally. And from that moment, what was really important is I think we thought change for us would be like really, really, really hard. But once we made change, things would be okay. But in 1973, understanding the history of our movement and what happened in 1933 in Europe with Nazism and with Stalinism, we started to understand that change wasn't linear, that we couldn't guarantee that we wouldn't backslide. And that really helps me understand this century. So in 1978, we had a whole lot of international engagements prior to 1978, and in the forum in the afternoon, we talked about the situation that was very dangerous in the United States with backsliding and the Christian right. We talked about repression of homosexuals in Cuba after the Congress on Science and Culture in 1970. We talked about the situation of homosexuals in Chile, for example, after the Pinochet coup and the beheading of drag queens in Santiago. And by the way, my Chilean comrades say that there's a really important vote on the weekend, and that they're worried that the far right will win in Chile with to ban abortion, really contradict what progress they've made in lesbian and gay rights, and particularly to penalise transgender people, all with money from American churches, which is not totally relevant for us. So that forum on 47 years ago today was really about our commitment to internationalism. Now, the group that came out of that and the groups that came out of that gay solidarity group, I remember we were demonstrating on all sorts of things, like lesbian and gay rights in Greece, in United Kingdom, in Russia, in India, and a number of times in the United States, also including around visas. But we weren't only narrowly focusing on lesbian and gay and transgender rights, because we understood how we had to integrate into big movements of liberation. So we played a role in movements like the anti-apartheid movement. And the product of that was a fantastic, well-based lesbian and gay organisations across South Africa, and the first constitution that recognised our rights. We were in the International Lesbian and Gay Association, but most importantly from '83, Betty Hounslow and some other people helped establish the Gay and Lesbian Immigration Task Force, which was incredibly important, the first really, I don't know what you want to say, mixed organisation driven by its members around those issues, and also the start of being really worried about our refugees, like people that were needing asylum because of their sexuality or their gender identity. So that was the agenda from last century. This century, and particularly in the last 15 years, we've got a general retreat from democracy, from human rights and from democratic space around reproductive freedom and around media. And this endangers, obviously, billions of people, not just us, but it has particular impact on transgender people, on lesbians and gays, queer people. The election of Trump is a really important signal about how we have to re-gear our movement internationally. Also European right, with Pride being banned in country after country in Europe. A little bit like our friend from Turkey will talk about as well. The situation in Russia, Hungary, Bosnia, and a range of countries is worse than it's ever been. The impact here, as I was saying, some of the organisations that campaign against us in Uganda or Kenya or in Chile or Brazil are operating here with the same investment. So if you look at what Advance did in the last elections, and all these organisations that are campaigning around purging libraries of like our books or attacking transgender people. There's an international structure for that. And frankly, our movement doesn't have an international structure that's adequate to defend us. So we need to talk about that. The other thing is the members of the Security Council of the UN, for their own reasons, have dismantled international law. All of the body of law that comes from after World War II, which in part, is driven by the newly independent countries, has been demolished by Russia, China, United States, and to some extent UK in recent period, particularly in relation to war. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because the Tasmanian law reform exactly appealed to international law. So I think in these current circumstances, we really need to think about our movement internationally and how we re-gear ourselves. So that's why we wanted to invite some of the people that had really added value, if you want, or made more exciting the Mardi Gras in the recent period. So maybe I'll ask you to introduce yourselves one by one, using that microphone. First, Alan from Türkiye, which is active around South Asian communities.
I'm Alan from Türkiye. I came out and about in the early 90s and lived a pretty fun life until I started to kind of hang around bars and pubs and find that I was the only one that was Indian or South Asian. And then every so often I'd see some guy in some dark, dingy corner of the bar and pub, and I'd kind of walk up and talk. And I'd find out that most of their experiences initially were negative. They were racist, they were based on color, and they were based on how they smelled and what they ate and that kind of stuff. And so they didn't really feel comfortable being there, but it was the only place for them to be. So I continued to live life and enjoy life, and then something must have kept niggling at me, and I thought, there must be a group for people like me. So there wasn't. And so I thought I'd better start something off myself. And I met up with a couple of lesbians in 2007 at a Greek dance party. And we formed this organization, Türkiye, that represents South Asia, which is all of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Burma, Fiji, Indians, basically anywhere where there are Indians, and they're pretty much everywhere. We progressed considerably. We started off as a very, you're telling me to stop, and I have to.
Oh, calm.
Okay, you're telling me to stop.
Here's the drum.
Should I be stopping?
No.
So we started off with a very transient population. There were kind of university students that come and go. Nobody wanted their names known. Nobody wanted to be photographed. They just wanted to dance and have a good time. And come down all these years, we've got a very well-established group. We put on some really good events and parties and do lots of health-related matters and talks and demonstrations. And I think we've got a very successful, motivated group of people working.
Thanks. Cemre, do you want to introduce yourself and your organisation?
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would love to acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land which we are meeting today, and I pay my respect to elders past and present. And I extend my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And I wanted to thank you, first Mardi Gras 70 people, to provide us the safe place to talk about our challenges. My name is Cemre, I'm 32 years old, and I spent 26 years of my life in Turkey very quietly and hiding myself who I was. And I made a big decision to move to Australia for freedom. And it's very sad that moving your hometown to another country to find yourself who you are and for the freedom. And once I came to Australia, I tried to find my community. And while I'm having friends and family, chosen family, and my path came across with the Capgemini, which I'm working last 3 years. And the Capgemini brought me beautiful people, and it made me discover what supports me. It's discovered me what I feel like to be accepted. Then with working with the Capgemini, and then it's provided me the space to advocacy for LGBTQI plus rights, and I'm now leading the outfront team to LGBT plus community group within the organization. While I'm running to this community group, I come with a couple of friends and think about what we can do for the people back in Turkey, which mean cannot march in the Turkey, cannot celebrate the pride, what we can do. And we came all together, the 60 people, for the first time, 47 years of the Mardi Gras history. We put our application as a Turkish queers, and we decided to march for people who cannot march in Turkey. And we try to be their voice, and we try to be their visible person within Australia. And I'm so proud that how I came to my progress, that I'm grateful to every person who helped me to get me here.
Okay. Alissar, performer and cultural worker, and has association with Club Arak, who you might know.
Hi, my name is Alissar, and yes, I founded Club Arak back in 2002. It was a much needed space for a lot of Arab queers in Sydney, and hence, in the end, the rest of Australia, because they fly in, which is wonderful. But before I go any further, I just want to acknowledge that we live on stolen land, and I don't say this lightly. I come from a land that is constantly being invaded and occupied and waged war upon, and so when I acknowledge Indigenous people of this country, I'm acknowledging also that I had to flee from a country because my Indigenous existence was not seen as important by some colonialists. And we do live in a colonialist country. Yes, Club Arak was founded in 2002. It is now officially the longest running queer Arab dance party all here in Australia and in the world, and I take huge pride in that. It has helped to galvanise a level of understanding of Arab queers in this country. It has helped to introduce a much nicer style of music instead of just doof doof doof. Now you can sway and shimmy. It has also empowered and given a safe space to a lot of queer Arabs as well as non-queer Arabs, because we do attract an incredible diversity of people that come to our parties from all throughout Asia, Western Asia and Eastern Asia, including North Africa, and they all feel completely empowered when they come to one of our parties. I'm also a performer, an actor, a producer, and sometimes a rap band. I missed 1978 by going to the wrong rally. I lived in the Hawkesbury, I heard about it somewhere, so I dragged some people across who ended up at the Rocks. I have no idea why. I didn't know Sydney very well, but then turned out my current partner was a 78er and one of my best friends is a 78er, so I feel like I've been there. Am I done? That'll do.
From your phone, I'll start with Alan, if that's okay. What I understand is that at the moment, relatively speaking, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Nepal have got sort of vaguely more progressive governments. But the ruling party in India and the government fronting for the military in Pakistan are essentially fairly conservative and threatening. So if you want to talk a bit about the dynamics, plus and minus for queer freedom in South Asia, that would help.
Thanks, Ken. Yes, so it's complex. So even though India, for instance, and this is the largest chunk in South Asia, reversed Section 377, which was a British Victorian thing around gay being horrible, should be jailed and shot. That reversal came through by the courts, by the highest court in the land, not the government. But it was the highest court in the land that put it through, and the government let it go through. This is the same government that's still in power, and it's a kind of a right-wing, bordering on fascist government. But the challenges in countries like ours isn't so much around legislation, it's around how society, and they're all pretty ancient societies, how they, through their cultural ways and beings, will come to accept what's being legislated. What certainly has happened since 2018 and the reversal of Section 377 is that we've had a queer spring in India at least. And so there isn't a city in India, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cities of over 1 million odd people, that doesn't have a pride, doesn't have a pride parade. They don't go insane on, during June, and my Facebook page and my Instagram page, apart from good-looking men, is riddled with pride events. It's amazing to see. I left India in '77, where I don't even know what it was to be gay, and there certainly was nothing around. So to see how much progress there has been. The transgender movement, which is across the globe, I think now become the dominant topic, and the people who are affected the most. In India as well, and in Sri Lanka, and in Bangladesh and Pakistan, have been around for centuries. And in India in particular, there's an interesting religious relevance. And so they've always been there. They come to bless things like weddings and births and all that kind of stuff. So they've always been around, but they're not being respected. That is starting to change. A lot of state governments, for instance, are changing legislation, are setting up buildings like safe spaces for them. And they're the most obvious looking queer person. If you're straight or lesbian or anything like that, you can pass off for not being one. But if you're transgender, it's very difficult. I was in India in January, and I got invited to 3 events during something like a queer month and a film festival and stuff. And what was really impressive was how major corporations, huge corporations, have all got queer supporting rights built into their human resource system. And they've got representatives in teams that lead groups. And it was amazing to see, you walk into something the equivalent of, IBM or something, and there's a whole floor dedicated to a queer space. I was amazed. So while that happens a lot, and I think, like you alluded to earlier on, there's now more of an aggressive push for fighting for rights, because mainstream might be supportive, but it's always the fringes that have the problem, and it's the fringes who are being teased by the federal government to make life difficult for anybody who's on the margins. So they've got to be admired for kind of what they do. When it comes to Pakistan and Bangladesh, Pakistan obviously doesn't have anything like progressive, but again, it sort of depends. There's a caste system, and there's a social system, and so the wealthier and the more up you are in that system, the better everything is accepted, and everybody knows somebody who is, and all that kind of stuff. And so that's okay as long as you keep it within your circle. But outside of that, it's dangerous. Just yesterday, we had a young Sri Lankan guy who has been in care, mental care, for the last year and a half, fighting to get refugee status or asylum status here, and he just got approved. But he's gone in and out of mental health institutions, fighting not to go back home because his parents and his uncles and aunts have threatened to kill him if he went back, because it's a shame. And you know, it's all about the shame on our family, the shame on the name. And so every country has its kind of progressive bits and its regressive bits, and you might often hear more about the regressive, but I really believe things are getting better and better, and I heard the bell.
Cemre, so my understanding is 20 years ago there were pride marches in Istanbul and some other cities, but Pride in Istanbul had like 100,000 people. But since 2013, 2015...
2015.
Yeah, early on has been increasing very intense police pressure against, and I know that that doesn't represent the sentiments of the people in Istanbul, but maybe if you want to talk about the dynamics in Turkey.
Yeah. First of all, most of the people surprising, Turkey does not criminalize the homosexuality, but the reality is there is no law to protect us. There is no law to discrimination for the sex orientation and gender identity. There is no marriage. There is no safety guarantee for education, workplace, healthcare. Especially the last couple of years, for the trans people, the state forces medical surgery and court approval just to legally exist. There is very big violence in Turkey at the moment for the all trans youth people. Turkish government, especially President Erdogan, has made LGBTQI people political scapegoats. We are just a portrait trait for the family values, future of the nation. And the cabinet minister and religious leaders in the Turkey, they call us perversion, and they call us diseases. We are not disease, we are just trying to be ourselves. And early 2010, Pride in Istanbul is the most biggest in the world, Muslim world. 100,000 people, they march in Taksim Square, Istiklal Square. It's with the joys, freedom, and it's after that in 2015, the Pride Month has been banned by government. Every time we are trying to march, we are meeting on the square, but every time it is ending with the police block of the street, fire the rubber bullet, and tear the gas in the crowd, and water cannon, drag the people from the street and arrest them. And they call us security threat. And then LGBTQI plus student clubs are shut down. All the LGBT flags removed. All the social media campaign is censored. The president even go far and call the LGBTQI plus people disease. That's happening every time, but we try to march every time because we try to show them that we are exist. Istanbul Pride is not just a celebration for us. For us, it's just a survival. We are not just trying to find our right. We're trying to tell them we are exist. We're trying to tell them that we wanted to heard, we wanted to see, we want to be feel like we are accepted. But it's not going to happen because the government, every time that when we're trying to do that, they just put in us as a security threat, and they treating us as a future of the nation. Many LGBT youth people in Turkey kick out their family apartment or house because they just being simply coming out. Mental health issues and suicide is rising because the current situation is that especially trans people cannot find the right to live in Turkey, and they just can't find the way to exist, and they just ended up suicide. And hate crime, Yes, every day is crime is rising because the people in the government encourage the people being a silence of the state. And what just government has done and what they're trying to do right now, they changed the constitution of the marriage between men and women. And they call the gender ideology in the school. They control the content, even on the kids' cartoon, there is censor for the queer representation. And they are trying to say that we are threat to families, but they forgot something. We have families. We are families. And we are not imported from the West. We are from Turkey. We are Turkish. We belong to Turkey. And we are still here. Every time when we try to march, police surround us, we dance. Every time politician curse us, we march. Even it is dangerous to be visible, we shine bright. And we last year in the Mardi Gras parade, we just tell all the people, all the communities, all the organizations in Turkey that we are here. We want to be our voice, and we want to show them that they are not alone. And we march here proudly, joyfully, and gratefully.
So it's always good to make a late entrance. So Andre, I first met him. I don't know how long he'd been in Mardi Gras, but there was this fantastic presence of fruits from Brazil during the struggle against Bolsonaro. And I guess now, from my understanding, things are not that terrible in Brazil compared to before, and things are not bad in Mexico, but Argentina is a nightmare. Like I said, Chilean elections coming up. So maybe if you want to say a little bit about yourself, but also, the dynamics, positive and negative, in everywhere south of the United States.
Okay, my name is Andre. I came here in 2014, and I co-founded the Fruits from Brazil, a non-profit association to help the Brazilian community to integrate in Australia. And about Brazil, now you have the Labour Party again, but the situation is not the same one, because it's quite complex to explain, but Brazil was growing very quick since 2002. And you had some things happen, you had a coup there, and after the right wing was in power, Bolsonaro, and it was very bad for all the minorities, like people and queer people. Now he's off, but I don't know, the Lula is back, he was the best president in Brazil, but now he's he made a coalition with different parties, and he doesn't have the power that he had before. And Brazil is a very complex country because it's very multicultural, and you have both sides, a lot of liberal people, open-minded people, but the other side you have a lot of religions, and quite similar to the United States. The situation there is better, but I think you need to do more things changing.
Do you want to say anything about other countries like Argentina now?
Yeah, Argentina, the situation in Argentina is very bad. A long time ago, they are in a big crisis. And now the new president, they cut all the relationships with Brazil, with this president, and he works he's an American puppet. And he do every situation for poor people that is quite worse too, because they took up all their rights, and he cut all the relationships with South America, and all Latin America. Brazil, I think if Brazil and Argentina work together, they can be more powerful. But the situation that this president is very bad.
So, yesterday was the largest pride in the world in Rio?
Sao Paulo.
Sao Paulo. So, do you want to talk a bit about the movement now in Brazil?
Yeah, it's like in São Paulo, my city is like the biggest city from Brazil. So then it's not like it's quite easy to be queer when you live in a bubble. And old people from like Latin America and queer people from Brazil, they used to go to São Paulo. It's a very big movement. I think they lost a little bit like in the past like 5 years. There was very like how can I say? Was they all make a lot of money, but they are doing a lot of things. Since like we have Bolsonaro, people start to think, realize, do more like for example, this year we'll be able to celebrate the oldest queers that survive and survived. And now we start to like to do things more social things, you know, like again. And it's a very big parade.
Maybe we'll come back. Yeah, thanks. Now she asked to go last. My memory is like during the Arab Spring, or so-called Arab Spring, there was space for queer people to mobilise in Tunisia, in a little bit Lebanon. I mean, the movement grew in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Syria, in Iraq, and particularly in Egypt. But the defeat of the democratic movements, apart from the magnificent democracy in Lebanon, almost all Arabic-speaking countries are not democracies. So, Alissar, do you want to talk a bit about Lebanon, but also reflecting on the challenges for queer movement in the neighbouring countries?
With every war or invasion or incursion, our rights get dwindled away. With every war, invasion or incursion, politics in the region gets more and more hardline. And the GLBTQI community becomes somehow a symbol of Western decadence. We are used as an excuse for governments to be more and more hardline. But there was a time, I mean, we all know, there's always been gays and lesbians. I don't have to tell you that. But there was a time where, particularly in Lebanon, and particularly soon after the end of the Civil War, where there was a blooming, a flowering of activities. It was public, it was in the open. Everybody knew someone who was gay. There was even an open discussion in political circles that the laws that criminalize our sexuality could be eroded and disappear, and there was a less and less criminalization, less and less sending people to jail for their sexual activities. By the early 2000s, HILM was established. HILM means dream, but was also an acronym for a queer rights movement in Beirut. And then a few years later, there was MEME, that was predominantly lesbian women feminist movement. But I've been observing this stuff for many, many years, and on every one of my visits until basically 2006 or 7, you could see that things were really improving. The Arab Spring brought a lot of hope for a lot of people, but the Arab Spring also threatened the political hegemony. It threatened authoritarian regimes in the Arab world, as well as it threatened the interests of the West. And I don't think we should ever forget that the West plays us for what we are, plays us for mugs. They're not interested in bringing democracy to the Middle East. They're not interested in the freedom of the people of the Middle East. They are, however, interested in controlling and in regime change in maintaining authoritarian regimes who are so corrupt that they will hand over all our resources to the Western world, and they can stay in power and the Western world is happy. They're not interested in whether queers are being hung or thrown off roofs. They play into the hands of Western imperialism, and the authoritarian regimes know exactly what they're doing. So does the West. So I just want you to be aware that when we hear really negative and horrific stories about what happens to gays and lesbians and queer people in the Middle East, on one hand, and the pink washing on the other, we are also being completely unaware of the fact that we in the West contribute to the demise of queer rights in the Middle East. At the height of the spring in Egypt, there were so many rainbow flags flying at rallies. The same in Tunisia, the same in Lebanon. Spring happened a bit later, because the Lebanese think every day is spring. But it happened a bit later, but the rainbow flag was at every rally. Queers were out in the open. And there was a terrible incident where one of the most famous Arab bands at the time, led by an openly gay man, Hamid Sino, was playing in Cairo. And the place was packed. It was soon after, of course, the Sisi government came in, which was completely sponsored and supported by the American government. And someone, a young woman, dared to jump on a friend's shoulders and wave the rainbow flag, and someone took a photo. An innocent photo, but it made headlines. The young woman was arrested, she was tortured, she was raped, and in the end she had to flee Egypt. A few years later, she wrote a really sad poem about her existence, about where she belonged in the world, and then she committed suicide. And it really cemented our belief that our oppressors are not just our Arab corrupt rulers. Our oppressors come from all over the place, and they all want to impress us. We are all the victims of war. There are gays and lesbians dying in Gaza. There are gays and lesbians dying in Iran, in Syria, in Egypt, in Lebanon, in the whole of Palestine. But we can very comfortably sit here in the West and claim that these barbaric Arabs need liberation from us. So therefore, hey, let's invade them and liberate them, just like we did in Iraq, just like we did in Afghanistan, and now let's do it with Iran. Regime change has nothing to do with our liberation. Regime change has more to do with controlling the flow of oil, the flow of gas, the flow of our resources to the wrong people. We don't get anything out of it. We don't benefit from it. If we're talking about internationalism, if we're talking about collectivism, if we're really talking about our connection as queers in the world, we also need to own up our responsibility as people who live in the West and contribute to the numerous corrupt Western leaders who feel to be maintaining the empire by maintaining ongoing wars in the Middle East and other places. Look what they've done in South America. Look what they do every day in Africa. We contribute to that every day. And the guilt that I, as someone who has lived for 55 years in the West, is ongoing because I'm torn. On one hand, I benefit from the wealth that we all share here in the West, but I see where that wealth comes from, and it's not coming from here. We all benefit from that empire. Am I done? You want me to?
Now we've got a lot of time, well, maybe not a lot of time, but we've got time for you guys to ask questions or make contributions. And I thought what I'd do is maybe like 3, and then we'll see if there's responses from the people you're asking. But of course I can't actually see anyone real well, so oh, that's better. So yeah, does anyone want to ask questions or say things? I mean, you've only got the entire world to talk about, you know. So.
I want
Wanda.
to say something, yes. there is a thriving gay population in the Middle East. There aren't Jews killing gay people. There's a thriving gay population there. Absolutely. And they are not colonisers. Colonisers are everywhere, British, Arab, throughout the world. We were born in that land 3,000 years ago. I'm Jewish. I'm not hiding that fact from anyone, ever, because I don't need to. And we have not started a war in the Middle East since 1948. That was the only one that we were responsible for, I would say. But however, we have never been anti-gay. And I want to know why Dianu, any representative from Dianu, is not here.
We don't have representatives of religious groups.
Well,
These are regional.
This has been totally about religion.
No, it hasn't.
Yes, it has.
No, it hasn't.
Yes, it has.
Okay, that's
You
all right.
don't see that.
We'll let people respond. Anyone else want to say something? Wow, that's exciting. Come on, surely people want to ask other questions or something.
I'm going.
Oh, sorry, Jesse and then Mark.
I just wanted to pass on, I just read a really, really interesting book, and I'll give you the title of it. A Short History of Trans Misogyny by Jules Gill-Harrison. And she asked the question, why is persecution of trans people, we might Hijra people in India, we are such a diverse group of people, we're not all trans people, we're called different names in different parts of the world. The diversity is enormous, and it's trans-historical and trans-cultural. But why is this hatred of us so ubiquitous? And she makes this point. I recommend you read this book, it's wonderful. She puts this all in the context of Western colonialism and imperialism. And her argument goes like this. They attack people like me who are born male or assigned male and behave in a feminine way. That is a contravention of two things, of gender, and because they all blur gender and sexuality together, of sexuality as well. So the key point that I took out of this book is, don't let them drive a wedge between gender and sexuality. And there are millions and millions of women out there who are straight, who are copying a bucket load of shit regarding the issue of bodily autonomy. My point is, we need to broaden our movement and get support from allies outside of LGBTIQ+. Thank you.
Thanks. Mark?
I'd just like to thank, before I ask a question, the 4 guest speakers from diverse parts of the world. It's just so fantastic to hear your voices here in Sydney, particularly on this day, because I'm 78 too. And I'll just pick up, it's a question for all 4 of you, that Ken mentioned in terms of, was it gearing up?
Yeah.
What was the phrase you used?
I think, I don't know.
Changing
Modern
circumstances required.
neoliberal people use recalibrate. But what I mean is, how do we change our movement here to deal with the rapidly changing international threats to queer people?
That's the question I'd like to put to the 4 guests in terms of where does this international queer solidarity, how does it take off now, particularly in the face of what's happening in the USA, but all of these parts of the different parts of the world. Where does it take off to? How do we now get that solidarity across all these different divisions that we really, really need?
Okay, that was the question I was going to pose in the last 20 minutes for each of them to give us guidance. So let's hold that for a moment. Maybe I'll take another question and then Richard.
I just wanted to ask, how limited are we at 5 o'clock? We've got some flexibility.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
good.
right.
Terrific. Okay,
So
that's
I
all
just
I
wanted to do a
know.
round of interaction and then another round of interaction and all of that. So any other people want to pose any?
Me.
Oh, sorry, couldn't see you. Virginia. More than welcome.
Thank you to each of you. It's wonderful to be here. But one of the things, a point that you made very clearly many times in your discussion, we're all colonialists, and so how do we actually understand that colonisation? Because we continue to colonise, and we do that on a daily basis. I think that part of our movement has kind of been sidelined to some extent, and so that's not necessarily seen as a queer. I don't necessarily use that on a lesbian, but I think that part of what we do in our daily lives is a really essential part of people understanding what colonisation and how we continue to colonise, because that's the very point that you made. And I think that for our movement to actually expand and to be able to not continually look inwards, but to look outwards, and who else can we actually have as allies? I mean, I'm not really that keen on that. I'm very much a cat person, so an ally a very different meaning for me. But I do think we have to add some humour to how we do things, but we have to revisit colonisation, because that is what we continue to do on a daily basis, at home and overseas.
Okay, so two questions sort of about okay. Rob, do you want to say something?
Yeah, a question.
Yep, sure.
We've talked about these different parts of the world where queers are persecuted, or life is not easy. How does the Australian government treat that in terms of a young queer person who might want to make an application to stay? I'm just naivety.
Maybe I'll just do that, and then we'll go back to the substantive question. Maybe
Okay.
Cemre can. But the problem is, where is the person? Are they in Australia, or are they registered with UNHCR, or are they in their home country? And unlike other countries, Australia makes it very hard. Yep.
He's here.
Sometimes they find themselves here.
Yeah, okay, and then we'll go back to the questions about colonialism and Jesse's question, okay? So first, Cemre, you want to talk?
So I came to Australia 2019 as a student visa.
Yes.
And then the situation in the Turkey that I find out that the freedom is here. And 2021, I applied for the protection visa. I'm an asylum seeker person, and I'm on the protection visa. And it's been 4 years. I'm still waiting to be granted. It's been 4 years. How stressful it is that I can't go to my country because I'm escaping from that. I can't go to another country to get out from Australia because I can't come back. So this kind of thing is so many mental health issues, mental stress, so much pressure. You can't see your loved ones, your families. You can only do for the video call. They can't come here because they say you are escaping from your country people, but I'm not escaping from my family, right? But they can't come here because they see them as a threat. They don't allow them to come here. I don't know the process how gonna happening in Australia, but it's very slow. It's been like 4 years I'm waiting to be granted for what? To be by myself, to who I am, to live in Australia by freedom. Yes, it's giving me the freedom, but it's not giving me fully granted.
Okay. Maybe who wants to deal with the questions from Wanda and Virginia about colonialism, and who wants to comment on Jesse, what Jesse said?
We voted no. That says so much about where we are in this country. And I lay the blame completely on the hands of John Howard. Right? John Howard left a shocking legacy in this country where hate became the norm, where everyone became a stranger and an enemy, where only a select people were an acceptable Australian. He allowed for riots in Cronulla and he called them a bunch of boys having a go. He ignored and denied there is racism in this country. He destroyed multiculturalism and he was a homophobe. So we have seen the dwindling of this nation ever since John Howard came in 1996. I'll never forget the day we were marching.
Yeah.
It was on Mardi Gras night, and by 9 o'clock we all knew John Howard beat the shit out of Paul Keating, and I remember sitting on a milk crate and crying my eyes out.
Yep, I remember too.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was a massive turn, and this country's never recovered because the conservatism in this country has been full on speed since, including the Labour Party, which are just as much to blame. And we follow through with every decision the US makes. We chase it like a hungry puppy. And we have a terrible president at the moment in the US for the second time running, run by conservative Zionists, Christian Zionists, I might add, not Jewish Zionists, they're not as bad, but Christian Zionists who run the country, and we follow them like mad puppies, and they influence our conservative politics in this country. Look at Dutton. We have a gay man in Melbourne who's just won a seat by a fraction for the Liberal Party, and that man has no gay awareness whatsoever. He would rather watch us all die and burn. The conservatism in this country is really dangerous. It denies colonialism, it denies where we are as a nation, and it denies how we contribute to colonialism and imperialism throughout the world. So we owe it to ourselves to be a bit more aware about where we stand in the world. Sorry.
I was just going to say, that man who just won that seat in Melbourne,
Yes.
he was appointed by Howard as the Human Rights bloody Commissioner.
Exactly.
So that says all you need to know
That's right.
about what you're saying. Thank you.
Just let's give a chance if you want, Alan or Andre, about the questions about colonialism or the questions that Jessie raised. Do you want to say things?
Well, I firstly want to say I never want to be invited on a panel where she is sitting on. Everything I wanted to say, I should say.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you didn't like it.
And that's what I don't like.
Okay, so you can have coffee after, right? Or a martini.
So I'm not going to try and repeat any of that, though you're absolutely spot on. But, you know, we're tribal as human beings. And so colonialism is just an extension of that. And it takes on a whole different kind of I'm better than you. And, being Indian, we know all about that as well. But what's sad, and so when you ask the question of, so where to from here as a movement, and I think the US and much of Europe have really worked hard to install all over the place these autocratic regimes who are in it for the money and the military help, but in turn being churned out every bit of resource that they've got that goes back to these sorts of places. So while that doesn't change, it makes everything really, really difficult in my eyes because they use us and they use anything to divide different groups of people as the reason that everybody should fight against. Since Trump has cut considerable international funding, he has, to be honest, I don't think that he cares, but he doesn't really have a concept of the number of people who've already died just because funding isn't going to aid organizations across the Middle East or into Africa, into parts of South India. Now, he might say, well, why can't you do your own stuff? And that's a valid argument. Why can't these countries generate their own support and resource and funds to support people? I know that India is doing that in part, but it's way too small, and it's being done not by government, but it's being done by large corporations. So I don't know what the answer is, but I just think that while we're in this world, and I believe we'll slip out of it, it's going to be tough.
And Jessie's contribution.
Can I make a comment about that?
Yes.
Because I want to link that with colonialism, right? The missing
Sorry?
piece, I want to link what I said with colonialism. The missing piece here is class relations. And we're not just
And
talking.
patriarchy.
Well, sure, absolutely. I mean, I've already talked about
Mm.
persecution of people who are feminine, right? Patriarchy is implicated in that. But what I'm trying to put here is the fact that, well, read your Communist Manifesto. Where does colonialism come from? It comes from European capitalism, okay? So what, all of these trans women who are in lots of, in the travesti, who are an example of gender and sexuality not being separated here, those people, they're in jail, right? We're the trash of the earth. I'm not. I'm educated. I've got a fucking PhD. I'm all right. So it's really, we've really got to think about this in terms of class as well as patriarchy, heterosexism.
Okay.
Because it also comes back when you talk about class. I mean, our history, I'm ancient, probably older than all of you, but growing up, you had to aspire. Everything had to be aspirational. You had to move up your class to make sure that you actually captured whatever was there. I mean, that was always a bit of an anomaly to me. I went to my equivalent of year 10, sort of thing without a partner because I wouldn't take a man. And my mother said, well, you can't go. And I said, of course I'm going. I'm going to miss that for quids. And, it was that whole thing about how do you actually rise. And so our colonial past is really always about how do we make it. John Howard with the word aspirational. I hate that word these days. It is absolutely death. And yet, so many people still maintain that because that is the flip side of colonialism. And so when we're constantly, and others, ScoMo and others, we're not even kind of subtle, when they're trying to actually get all of the guys who are driving utes and, the people who are tradies to actually sort of aspirationally become Liberal Party members and donors.
It goes without saying that it's patriarchal capitalism.
Okay, maybe there's Barry, and then I'll take some other contributions or questions, but particularly if there's questions or contributions about like queer movement in particular countries or whatever. Barry?
Yeah, this is what I'm going to say is quite possibly self-evident, but sign up there says Day of International Gay Solidarity. And that's the problem, is that we get a surge of internationalism, but ultimately we fall back into our individual countries. All the panellists have been able to describe waxes and wanes of gay freedoms and liberations over decades. We make a gain in a particular country, and that particular country sits on their laurels. And that's when we lose the internationalism. And that moves around the planet from country to country. And what we need is not a day of international gay solidarity, but an entire international organisation of solidarity that keeps the fight running from country to country, even when a victory has been achieved. I don't know whether that's...
Anyone else want to... Anyone else want to say anything? Or it's like a Quaker meeting, we're going to wait in silence.
Up top there.
Richard?
Oh,
sorry.
Peter.
Peter, and then Richard.
Okay. Well, I think that missing from the discussion is what's happening in the United States and Europe. So that brings forward the prominence of the colonialism and imperialism in the discussion. But really, we're dealing with a universal problem. Australia, I don't think it'll last much longer. It really stands out as different at the moment. But there's really horrible things been happening in Europe for years. And now the United States is really peaking out, and what Donald Trump is doing is leading from the top. So we've got a global problem, and yes, class, race, gender, all of them are factors in it. But if we don't grasp it, we're going to really get wiped out. And when World Pride was here a couple of years ago, it was the most disappointing aspect of the great conference, and hardly anyone wanted to talk about this problem. Well, we have to do something. I don't like World Pride is out there, but it's not doing this job. So I think it's good to ask us, what are we going to do here in Sydney? What are we going to do here in Australia? We can do something, and that's the best way to start the push back the other way, I think.
Okay, Richard?
Thank you. Look, I was thinking about what you were saying about the Honourable John Winston Howard. And I thought I'd just give a couple of personal reflections. Now, I'm a New Zealander by birth. In 1996, I became an Australian citizen after 30 years here because if I wanted to get employed in my new industry, health, in the Commonwealth, I had to be a citizen. I received my citizenship the Monday after John Winston Howard became the Prime Minister. That's the first comment. Secondly, my family, my father was a merchant seaman. He had a captain's certificate of competence. My birthday is the 26th of August. Tampa Day is the 26th of August. Every birthday that comes around, I think of John Winston Howard. And I don't really like that man at all, and I'm shocked that he's continued to have, should we say, a political presence, just as, I'm also shocked by the fact that Scott Morrison denied the fact that there was blackbirding in Australia. There are amazing pictures of Kanak people from the South Pacific who were in chains around their necks, or rings around their necks and chains between them. It is our history, all of this, and it's denied. And I think we have to really be aware that all of us, even gay men, what I think of as gay women, lesbians, etc., all of that rainbow acronym, have responsibilities that you guys are talking about. I'm pretty pissed weak as far as that goes. I'm not a good organiser and so on, but when we have these discussions, something bites me. And I just really want to say thank you very much for touching on all these things and making me get off my ass and say a few words.
Maybe because of what Peter and yourself and Mark have said, maybe we should just move into giving you four a chance to reflect on what's been said, but really to say what do you want or need in terms of what do we need to be doing here. I feel really strongly that we've got obligations. We benefited from international solidarity a lot, and we've got obligations to be conscious of what's happening to queer people everywhere. And I feel very strongly that the winds are blowing very badly, almost everywhere. So it's sort of battle stations. So I guess if you don't mind to sort of give us some ideas about, based on the discussion, about how you'd like to see us shaping things up over the next couple of years, and giving some effective focus to defending our rights globally. So is it okay to go in the order that people spoke? Alan, you okay?
Yes. I think if we were talking about us here in Sydney, here in Australia, then I don't see diversity in the way that it's used and talked about. Never has Mardi Gras led or reached out to groups like mine and talked about how can we work together to make a difference. That's come through maybe sometimes with ACON. It became an issue for World Pride, but that was more about winning the event to happen here in Sydney. So for me, it's a case of bringing all of our different groups, and there's quite a few of us, together. So even just ask, what's happening in your region? And what can we do from a point of going to government and then asking for funding to try and help us, either here, to then maybe impact in the regions we come from. Diane and I are part of Oceania, and Oceania is this colossal area with tons of little islands who have little or no financial assistance, and often with governments that are not overly supportive. So our question to ourselves is always, what difference can we make to these islands and to the people from there? They're not always necessarily entirely queer issues. They are women's issues, and there are a whole bunch of other stuff. So, and without funding, it's difficult to do that. Without bringing the largest organizations that are represented here to come together and talk about stuff like this, it's difficult for people to know that.
Cemre, you want to go next about what we could do to help struggle in Turkey?
I think it's not just about the LGBTQI plus people, it's about the human right. We need to get away from the crime in one country, and it empowers the other country to get away from them. We need the human right. We need to change the mentality. Whoever at the moment on the top, like president, if the mentality is same, we can't change. We need the international solidarity. We need the visibility. We need to show them that, look, what's happening around you. For example, in Australia, when we march in Sydney, we show them, we empower all the LGBT people to don't scare, go, raising the flag, starts saying that, yelling people, be visible. But what we need is here, we need allies. We need the people to support the outside of the country. We need the government. For example, Australia government needs to show that what's going on here, what we can change all around the world. That if we show them that what happening, people is here happy, joyful, proud, and we can show them here what's happening, that it will empower the countries. It will empower the changes.
Thanks. Alissar? Okay.
You might not like what I have to say. But I've always been on the outside of the movement here in Sydney, because I've never felt that I was represented by the movement. The movement here is very white. It's very entrenched in the way it sees the world, and you're a microcosm of the whole of Australia, which is generally very racist. And I have come across so many occasions dealing just with ACON or Mardi Gras, just those two organisations, where our exotification had to serve them. And I have found that process to be so demeaning and so offensive, and having to try to constantly explain that I don't need to be exotified and I don't need to make you feel good about yourself. by being inside your group. You just have to accept who we are and what we are, and accept the fact there is so much diversity within the queer movement, but allow and give space to that diversity. Don't just tick a box and go, yeah, diversity. Yeah, we're all for diversity. And then when it comes to the Mardi Gras parade, you stick people in these little exotic boxes. It is so offensive to have to constantly explain who we are and what we are and why we have to exist. I've always said I don't always identify. My prime identity is not as a lesbian. My prime identity is a WOG. I have to constantly explain to people that I'm a migrant. I'm constantly being asked 55 years later, where do you come from? When did I become an Aussie? My great-grandfather came here in 1890. He came here before I was born. He left his babies behind. If he was still alive today, he would still be asked, where do you come from? It's like, when do we ever fit? And we all collectively are responsible for that attitude. That's what stops us from being internationals. That's what stops us from having a collective movement that represents everyone and everyone's woes and problems. But we are too focused on here and the now and what's in front of us. And I understand many of you here in this room fought the big fight and made it really easy for someone like me to exist in this country. You've given us the rights, and I applaud you for that. But the fight isn't over. And some of you behave as if the fight is over. Oh yeah, we've got our rights. It's like Western feminists, white feminists. Oh, we've got our rights, now we can damn to hell brown feminists and brown women for wearing a veil or for choosing to never have an abortion. It's like, where is the awareness? Life is political. Our whole existence is political. And yet we get people who say, no, pride is all about being fabulous. Let's not get political. Our whole existence is political. Pride is political. Mardi Gras is political. Look what's happened to Mardi Gras in the last so many years. It became a fucking ad campaign for ANZ and Westpac and the police. It became a PR campaign instead of a community campaign. That's why no one goes there. I don't go to Mardi Gras. It's like, what does it say to me when I'm standing waving my rainbow flag, when ANZ passes by and tells me that I belong? We've forgotten our ways. We've sort of completely missed the boat on that one. And I really think, given our blind support that the Labor government and the Liberal government in this country give to the US, they're going to follow suit. And if Trump wipes away all of our rights in the US, not just gay and lesbian rights, but women's reproductive rights. I mean, my God, it's like talk about the Handmaid's Tale in the US. The same will eventually happen here. Are we going to walk blindly into it? So wake the fuck up. Thank you.
In my point of view, I think you need to do a different thing. Try to rethink what you did, where you are now, and start to work together. Start here in Sydney with like the multi-cultural and people from here, and think about the future, and then start to do international thing, and see what's happening in different countries. The good things that happen there, the bad things that happen there, the bad things that can happen here. And we start to think, because it's a nice event, it's a big event in Mazor, but it's true, but where does this money go? Someone is helping the queer community, like the queer kids, the people who need to work, and I think you need like meeting people where work together, and we start a different thing, because it's not working.
Okay, we didn't end on a fabulous course of action and total inspiration. But I think our guest speakers were incredibly eloquent, and it's really important we spend a bit of time thinking about what they contributed. And give a lot of respect, not just to them as people, but to the organisations that they've built and that they represent. And for me, they and other groups are the best part of the Mardi Gras. And so I'd like to thank Alissar and Cemre and Alan and Andre. And I guess there's a bit of time for us to mingle, and you know, we can, you know, attack each other about not having the right line. No, but seriously, people can you know, talk a bit more with each of them about situations in different places and what's needed. So, and a lot of respect for my elders that are here and my peers, and thanks a lot everyone for being here.
Thank you.